My name is Tori Myers. I'm 38. And the Tuesday my mother told me, "We just borrowed your car, honey. Don't make this dramatic," was the morning I learned how a quiet woman becomes a loud one. It was a little after 7. I was standing at my kitchen sink in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, with coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, watching my driveway. The driveway was empty. My Honda CR-V had been there at midnight. It was not there at sunrise. I had already dialed the police when my mother called. 3 days later, a state trooper would call me from Allentown. He would tell me my car had been impounded. He would tell me my younger sister had been driving it on a suspended license. He would tell me my niece and nephew had been in the back without belts. He would tell me the fees had run to $1,800. And he would tell me gently that this was the easy part of what he had to say. Before I take you back to that morning, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and drop a comment below with your city and the time it is right now where you are. I want to know who is here with me tonight. Now let me take you back to the Sunday before any of it happened. The last Sunday I ever called my mother Mom without thinking twice. Let me start, actually, with the morning the car was already gone. It was a Tuesday in October. The kitchen smelled like coffee and the faint rubber of new sneakers. Liam was at the table eating cereal with the kind of careful attention 7-year-olds give to anything that crunches. I had a QuickBooks file open on my laptop next to the toaster. I review numbers in the morning. I review feelings later, after a second cup. I walked Liam through his teeth-brushing list, the way I do, while I refilled my coffee. Then I looked out the window over the sink, the way I always do, just to check on the world. The driveway was empty. I'm a CPA. Process before panic. I keep a yellow legal pad on the counter for grocery lists, and I wrote, 7:14 a.m., Honda CR-V, not in driveway. Then I picked up my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher was kind. She asked the right questions. I was on hold for a unit when my phone buzzed in my hand with a text from my mother. "Don't be dramatic. We borrowed it Friday. We'll explain." The next text said, "Honey, please." I told the dispatcher I had information and would call back. I sat down at the kitchen table across from Liam. "Mom, where's your car?" he said. "Grandma borrowed it for the weekend." He thought about that. "Without asking?" "Without asking," I said. He nodded, the way kids do when they file something away for later. I called an Uber. I checked my insurance app on the way to the office just to be sure. There was no stolen vehicle alert. I made a mental note to ask my mother how she had gotten my keys, and then I made an actual note in the audit sheet I kept in Excel for what I called personal events. The spreadsheet I had started after my divorce, the one nobody knew about, the one where I logged anything I didn't want to forget. Maeve, the paralegal who shared the break room with me, took one look at my face when I came in and asked if I'd slept. I smiled the way a person smiles when she is paying for the smile in advance. "Mostly," I said. "Mostly is not yes, Tori. It's the closest I've got to yes today." She let it pass. I told myself the borrowed weekend would explain itself. By Friday at 6:14 it would. But the explanation was not going to be the one I was hoping for. 2 days before the empty driveway, I drove out to my parents' house in Quakertown for Sunday dinner. I had taken Liam in his soccer jersey, even though there'd been no soccer that day, because he was proud of it, and because my mother would coo over him in his soccer jersey. I parked behind my father's pickup. The yard had the smell of October it gets in southeastern Pennsylvania, leaves burning 2 streets over, somebody's gas grill. The dining room had 6 chairs around the table. I counted, because I always counted. My father at the head, my mother to his right, my sister Brielle, Brielle's son Mason 6, Brielle's daughter Harper 4, Liam, that was 6. I have a chair, of course. I'd had a chair at that table for 30 years. But that Sunday the chair across from my father was a folding chair, the brown metal one from the back porch. And my mother said, light as a song. Honey, just grab the porch one, you're tall enough. I grabbed the porch one. Brielle was telling a story about driving Mason to soccer practice. She told it the way she told most stories, with her shoulders pulled up to her ears and her eyes a little wet. My mother glanced at my father. My father did not glance back. He buttered a roll. It's just so much, Brielle said. Some weeks I can barely keep the car between the lines. Honey, my mother said. I'm just saying. Honey, my mother said again. I cut Liam's chicken. The casserole was green beans with cream of mushroom and the dry onions on top. I ate 2 helpings because it was the food of my childhood, and because the food of my childhood is a chair I have always been allowed to keep. Liam was quiet on the drive home. He fell asleep against the window outside Center Valley. I turned the radio down. About a mile from our exit, he said, in the slurred voice of a half-asleep child, Mom? Yeah, buddy. Why did Aunt Brielle keep crying when there was nothing wrong? Adults cry sometimes, I said. It's not always about the moment. Okay, he said. I would learn what Brielle was crying about. I would also learn it had been rehearsed. But that night, driving home with my son's hair against the cool glass, the car still felt like mine. After dinner that Sunday, before the chicken had cooled all the way, Liam and I went out to the driveway, and I showed him the dash cam. I'd installed it the year before, after a fender bender at a grocery store parking lot, where the other driver had told 3 different versions of what happened. The cam was a small black thing tucked behind my rearview mirror. It recorded forward and into the cabin both. It also kept recording on a low draw for an hour after the car was off, in case anybody touched it in a parking lot. Liam thought it was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. It can hear us, he said. It can hear us. Even when the car is asleep? For a little while after? He pressed his palm against the plastic to feel the warmth of it. The porch light came on automatically, soft yellow, and my mother appeared in the doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder. Honey, can you stay another minute? She said. I made too much tea. I left Liam tracing the wires with his finger and went inside. My mother poured me a mug of Earl Grey from a pot that had been steeping a little too long. She opened the drawer beside the stove for sugar, and from where I was standing, I could see the inside of the drawer. There was a Honda key in it, on a small brass ring. Mine. I put my mug down. Mom, that's my old spare. She looked at the drawer like she'd just noticed it. Oh, that. We've kept it for emergencies all these years. You never asked for it back. Can I have it tonight? Honey, my hands are full. She closed the drawer. She smiled at me with that soft, exhausted smile she'd been smiling since I was 12. Don't make a scene over a piece of metal. I drank the tea. I told myself I would ask again next Sunday. There would not be a next Sunday in that house. On the drive home, the dash cam recorded the empty highway and the back of Liam's sleeping head. It also recorded me asking myself, out loud and quietly, why my mother had not given me the key. I didn't know it then, but the cam was already doing its real work for me. 43 hours later, my driveway was empty and my mother's voice was in my ear. Honey, don't make this dramatic. We borrowed it Friday for Brielle's weekend with the kids, her Subaru's transmission. We didn't want to bother you with permission. Where is it now? She's bringing it back tonight. I was sitting at my cubicle. The fluorescent light above me had a small flicker in the left tube. I could hear, under my mother's voice, a rehearsed quality I had heard before but never quite named. I'd like the spare key back tomorrow, I said. We'll see, my mother said. We hung up. I opened Excel. I logged it. Tuesday, 9:47 a.m. Mom called. Confirmed Friday borrow without consent. Refused to commit to spare key return. I closed Excel. I worked. The QuickBooks file for the Henderson account didn't care about my driveway. I cared about the Henderson account. I balanced 4 months of receivables before lunch. By 6 that evening, The car had not come back. I texted my mother. She replied, "Tomorrow, honey. Don't worry yourself." I asked Liam if he wanted spaghetti or grilled cheese for dinner. He said both. I made both. After he was in bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up the insurance company's app. There's a feature on my policy I'd opted into for a discount: telematics. The app records mileage and trip times. It saves the start point and the end point of every trip with timestamps. I hadn't checked it in months. I scrolled. Saturday afternoon, 2:14 p.m. The car had been pinged sitting on a side street in Allentown. Allentown is 38 miles north of my house and 41 miles north of where my sister lived. I was an accountant. I knew what it meant when the numbers stopped matching the story. The story was the part that was lying. I closed the app. I made a fresh cup of decaf coffee I would not drink. I sat at the kitchen table for an hour with my hands wrapped around the warm mug, and I thought about my mother's voice on the phone, that small, taut quality, and about the fact that she had not asked me, even once, if I was upset. The trooper would call on Friday at 6:14. By then, I had 3 days to wait, and an audit sheet that was already 3 rows long. The phone rang at 6:14 on a Friday. The microwave was beeping at the same time, 3 short tones to tell me my pasta water had finished, and for a moment I almost let the phone ring. "Ma'am, this is Trooper Jenkins, Pennsylvania State Police. Am I speaking with Tori Myers, registered owner of a 2018 Honda CR-V? "That's me." "Ma'am, your vehicle was impounded yesterday afternoon. There was a routine traffic stop on Route 22 in Allentown. I need to walk you through some details. Are you in a place where you can hear me?" I sat down on the kitchen tile. The microwave kept beeping until I reached up and pressed clear. "Yes, sir." He spoke the way troopers do, in plain, careful English. The driver had been my sister, Brielle Marie Myers. Her license had been suspended since January. The 2 minors in the back, ages 6 and 4, had not been restrained. There had been a single broken vape pen in the glove compartment containing trace THC residue, and the children had been sufficiently unsettled at the stop that the trooper had requested a follow-up well check from the county. I heard him. I also heard the small voice in the back of my own head saying, calmly, "Of course she didn't have a license." "Ma'am, your vehicle is at Allegheny Towing in Allentown. The total comes to $1,800 in fees. We require the registered owner to retrieve in person within 5 days. Bring title, registration, and a photo ID." "I understand." "Ma'am, one more thing. Your sister also asked us to call you collect from the precinct yesterday evening. She used your name 3 times. I should let you know, for clarity. She did not have permission documentation for the vehicle." "I understand that too." He paused. I think he had expected me to cry. I think most people cried. "Ma'am, I'd like to ask one more question. When was the last time you knew your sister to have a valid driver's license?" I knew the answer. I had not been allowed, until that moment, to know that I knew it. "I think she had one when she was 24, I said. "She's 33 now." "Yes, ma'am, that tracks." I thanked him. I hung up. Liam called from the living room and asked if dinner was almost ready. I told him almost. I stood in the kitchen for 47 seconds, counting them on the microwave clock, and then I drained the pasta and called him to the table. Saturday morning, I drove Liam to his father's house in my rental sedan. I told him I had some adult work to take care of. He hugged me with both arms and said, "Have a good adult day, Mom," and went inside without looking back. It was 47 minutes from there to Allegheny Towing. I had the address in my phone. I had the title in a folder on the passenger seat. I had a thermos of black coffee. The lot was a long, fenced rectangle behind a body shop. There was a small office trailer out front. The clerk inside was named Pete, according to the patch on his work shirt, and he had been doing this for so long that he could read a face the way I read a balance sheet. "Honda CR-V?" he said. Came in Thursday. That's mine. He passed me a clipboard. The bill was an itemized list. Tow, $375. Storage, 5 days at $48 a day. Impound fee, $350. Child welfare investigation hold, $500. Administrative retrieval, $335. Total, $1,800 even. I pulled my legal pad out of my bag and copied the breakdown line by line, in pencil. Pete watched me copy it. Then he said, very quietly, "Most folks just sign and cry, ma'am." "I'm not most folks." "No, ma'am, I see that. Take a copy of the breakdown. You'll want it later." I paid with the emergency card. I followed Pete out to the lot. There was a fresh dent in the rear bumper. There was dried vomit on the back seat fabric. There was a small white sneaker, Mason's, wedged under the front passenger seat. There was a smell I could not name, and at the same time could name perfectly. It was the smell of a stranger's family having lived inside something I owned. I drove home with all 4 windows down and the heat turned all the way up. The car warmed up the cold air the way bodies warm up cold sheets. I stopped at a gas station outside Bethlehem and bought every cleaning product they had. Wipes, upholstery foam, a bottle of orange odor neutralizer, and I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I went home. Then I drove home and parked in my own driveway. The driveway, suddenly, felt like a piece of evidence, too. I called my mother at 1 p.m. I had cleaned the back seat first. I made the call from my kitchen because I make hard calls from kitchens. There's a particular cardinal that comes to the bird feeder outside my window every afternoon, and I wanted it as a witness. "Mom, when did Brielle's license get suspended?" "Tori, don't put your sister through this on the phone." "I'm not putting her through anything. I'm asking you a question." There was a pause, then a softer one. Then she said, "January. And you let her drive my car." "Honey, your father, we didn't know she'd—" There was a click, and my father came on the extension. "Don't make this dramatic, Tori. The girl had a hard week. Nobody was hurt." I heard the phrasing, "nobody was hurt." It is the phrasing of somebody who has chosen, in advance, to define hurt narrowly. "Was it a hit and run?" I said. The pause this time was longer than the one before. My father did the thing he does where he breathes out through his nose. My mother said, "Tori, it was complicated." "Was it a hit and run, Mom?" "Honey, I don't think it helps anybody to yes or no. It was complicated." I knew that complicated meant yes. I sat down at the kitchen table. The cardinal came to the feeder, did 3 quick pecks, and went again. I watched him go. "Mom," I said, "I need you to understand. I'm not angry on the phone right now. I'm asking, on the record, who in our family knew about Brielle's suspended license? Who decided to keep that from me when you took my car?" "You're being a lawyer, Tori." "I'm being a person who paid $1,800 yesterday." "Honey, you can afford it more than your sister can." That was the line I had heard in some form my whole life. I had heard it as a child, when the new shoes went to Brielle and the hand-me-downs came to me. I had heard it after my divorce, when I was the one who had been able to keep the house, and so I was the one who could be asked to keep funding everything else. I told my mother I had to go. I hung up before either of them could say my name. I texted Maeve, "You free Monday morning before clients?" She replied within the minute, "Yes. Coffee. My treat." Maeve and I met at a coffee shop near the office at 7:45 on Monday. The shop was the kind with a tile floor that someone bleached on Sundays. The espresso machine had a small green pilot light. Maeve was already there, in a corner booth, with 2 cups of coffee and a cinnamon roll cut in half on a single plate. She didn't say hello. She said, "Eat half of that. We'll talk while you chew." I ate half. I told her, in plain language, what had happened. The empty driveway, the trooper, the bumper, the $1,800, the phone call to my mother, the word complicated. Maeve listened the way she listens, which is the way some women earn their hair gray. She drank her coffee. She did not interrupt. When I was finished, she said, "Honey, I'm going to ask you a hard question." "Okay. Are you a witness or are you a target?" "What's the difference?" "A witness has a story to tell about what happened. A target has liability. You're both right now. We need to know which one matters most by Friday." I rolled my pen between two fingers. I had been doing that since middle school. My father had once told me it was a tic that made me look nervous in meetings. I had stopped doing it for him. I had started doing it for myself again, the year of my divorce. "What kind of liability?" "Insurance," she said. "Possible negligence claims if anybody was hurt and a lawyer comes back later. Your name on the title is your name on the title. Then there's the part that's not on paper yet." "What part?" "The part where your family thinks the next 1,800 is yours to give." She slid a business card across the table. Sloan Aldrich, Esquire, Family Law, Aldrich and Wells. "My daughter," Maeve said. "She does this kind of work. Mostly elder financial abuse." "My parents aren't elderly, Maeve." "I didn't say it about your parents." I looked at her. She looked back. I picked up the card and put it in my wallet, behind Liam's school photo, where I keep things I might need quickly. "Tori, sweetheart, I've been a paralegal for 22 years. I know what families look like before the lawyer is called. Yours is past it." I drank the rest of my coffee. The card stayed in my wallet for 9 days. That Monday night, after Liam was in bed, I plugged the dash cam into my laptop. I had been avoiding it for 4 days. The cam was small, but it held a lot. I made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and I cycled through the footage in chronological order, the way you'd cycle through bank statements. Friday, the day my parents took the car, was easy. There was footage of the driveway in the dark. Then Brielle's face, briefly, leaning across to start the engine. Then the windshield as they pulled out. Then nothing for several hours. Saturday afternoon was where it got loud. The cabin audio came up at 1:43 p.m. The kids were in the back. Mason was asking, in his small, persistent voice, if they could listen to Encanto again. Harper was humming. Brielle had her phone on speaker, propped on the dashboard, and she was talking to someone whose name I could not quite catch. What I caught, very clearly, was this. "So they don't suspect we used Mom's idea. If anything happens with the cops, just say I'm staying at Tori's place that night. That's the address on file." Then, after a pause, she said, "Yeah, Dad already called the lawyer in case." I stopped the playback. I went back 10 seconds. I played it again. Then I played it a third time. Mason's small voice, in the background of the third play. "Mommy, can we listen to Encanto again?" I sat at the kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The light over the sink had a soft yellow ring around it that I had never noticed before. I had spent my whole life being told I was the dramatic one. I had spent my whole life being told I read into things. I had not, until that Monday, understood the use of the word dramatic. It was a word that had been done to me. It was a word that had been spoken in a kitchen by a woman who had been sitting in a car with 2 children whose seatbelts had not been buckled, and who had been on the phone with someone. My father, I assumed. Coordinating which lie to tell if the lie became necessary. I opened a new sheet in my Excel workbook. I named it Audit. I logged the timestamp. The audit had begun. Tuesday morning, I did what an accountant does. I researched. Pennsylvania has a public records portal for court filings. It's clunky and the search is slow. I made coffee, set my laptop on the kitchen table, and worked through it the way I worked through any messy ledger. Slowly, line by line, keeping my own running notes. Brielle Marie Myers, defendant, Berks County, January of this year. Plea entered. The case name was a careful summary of what had happened. A parked vehicle struck on a residential street late at night, the driver leaving the scene, the driver later identified by camera footage from a neighbor's porch. She had pled to a lesser charge. The license suspension had begun the next week. I logged it. Then I searched her name in the next county over, the one where her custody case lived. I had not even known there was a custody case. There was. February of this year. Lehigh County, filed by Brielle, naming her ex-partner, Mason's father, as the respondent. She was petitioning for primary custody. The complaint cited stable cross-county residence with extended family support. The address she had listed for the residence was not her own apartment in Reading. It was my townhouse in Bethlehem. I read that line 3 times. She had filed papers in February claiming she lived with me. She had been driving my car the previous Saturday, across state route lines, in Lehigh County, to attend a Friday afternoon meeting at her custody attorney's office in Allentown, with the kids in tow. She had been building a paper trail of her presence in my county, in a car registered to my address. If the custody case had progressed without anyone catching it, my home would have been a registered residence in a custody dispute I had not known existed. I would have been a non-party deponent. I would have been deposed. My son would have been pulled into the orbit of it. My ex-husband, Liam's father, would have been told by his own attorney that we needed to talk. Brielle had not been stealing my car for a weekend. Brielle had been stealing my address for a year. I printed the relevant docket pages at the Public Records Office in Bethlehem. The man behind the counter said, 80 cents, please. I handed him $1 and told him to keep it. He looked at me strangely. I think it was the first time I had smiled in 3 days. Tuesday afternoon, I picked Liam up from school. He climbed into the passenger seat. He had been allowed in the front for a year now, and buckled in carefully, the way I had taught him. He sat with his backpack on his lap. He smelled like crayons and the particular pink rubber of cheap erasers. We drove home along the back road that takes you past the orchard. The leaves were full red on the maples. He looked out the window for a while, and then he said, Mom, is Aunt Brielle okay? I did not lie. He was 7, but a particular kind of 7. Their mom is figuring some grown-up things out, I said. And Mason and Harper are with their dad for a little while. They're safe. Are you a grown-up figuring grown-up things out too? I laughed gently. It was the first laugh in 4 days. Yes, buddy. I think I'm doing it for the first time. He nodded, the way kids do. I want to pause here for just a second. If you have ever spent your whole life being the reasonable one in your family, the one they call when something is broken, but never when something is being celebrated, comment reasonable below. I want to know how many of us there are tonight. And if you are new here, the subscribe button is the small one that doesn't ask anything of you in return. Now back to that Tuesday. When we got home, Liam took his backpack to the kitchen table and got out his math homework. I made him a glass of milk. I sat across from him and watched him work for a while. The light in the kitchen at 4:15 in October has a quality I cannot quite describe. It is gold the way honey is gold, and it lays itself across the maple table the way a cat lays across a sunbeam. I had been told my whole life that holding my own ground was a kind of selfishness. I had been told that loving people meant absorbing their consequences. I sat there watching my son carry the 4 to the 10s column with the careful pencil grip of a kid still learning, and I thought about how much love I had absorbed for other people's consequences in my time, and how little of my own life I had built without that weight. Liam fell asleep against my shoulder during a movie that night. I sat there for 10 minutes after the credits rolled and did not move. Wednesday at 11:02 a.m., my desk phone buzzed. It was Brielle. She was sobbing. CPS had visited her on Monday. The trooper's well check had triggered it. And she needed money. $5,000. For her custody attorney and for an emergency parenting class the court was now requiring. Tori, I am begging you. I cannot lose them. I cannot. I let her cry through the receiver for a while. I watched the small green light on my desk phone blink with each sob. Then I said, "I'll think about it. I have to go." I logged the call. Time and topic. At 11:23 a.m., my desk phone buzzed again. My mother. She was using her gentle voice, the one she used at funerals, and when she was about to ask for something from me, she would not have asked from Brielle. "Honey, the children. You're the only one in the family with savings." "I'll think about it, Mom. I have to go." I logged that too. At 11:41 a.m., my desk phone buzzed for the third time. My father. "We'd cover it ourselves, Tori, but the basement flooding last fall, you remember, really hit us hard. And you always had the better head for money. That's why we're asking you." He said it like it was a compliment. He said it like he had not been quietly moving money out of my old college fund for 6 years to do it. I did not yet know about the college fund. I would learn about the college fund on Friday afternoon. But sitting at my desk that Wednesday, hearing the same script delivered 3 times in a 39-minute window, in 3 different voices that thought they were sounding spontaneous, I knew enough. "I'll think about it, Dad. I have to go." I hung up. I stared at the green light on my phone. I picked up my pen and rolled it between my fingers. The old tick. Back again. An old friend. I thought about the way the call had been choreographed. The same pause before the ask in each one. The same word children placed at almost the same spot. Even the same sigh. I opened the email I had drafted to Sloan Aldrich Esquire the morning before. I had not sent it. I sent it. The card had been in my wallet for 9 days. It went into rotation at noon. Sloan's office was in a converted brick row house on a side street in downtown Bethlehem. There was a brass plate by the door that just said Aldrich and Wells. The waiting room had a single chair, an old umbrella stand, and a print of a bridge on the wall. Sloan came out herself, in flats and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and shook my hand. She was 32 and looked 32 and made no effort to look any older. She listened to the whole story without taking a single note. Then she opened a yellow legal pad and started taking notes. "Tori, I want to walk you through what's coming. Tell me if you want to stop at any point." I nodded. She listed it out for me, 1 finger at a time, like a child counting frogs. 1. The $1,800 is paid. That's done. Don't expect to see it back from your sister. 2. Your insurance policy. Once the unauthorized driver report goes in, your premium goes up. A quarter, possibly a third. You may receive a non-renewal letter. I'd say it's 50-50. 3. Your homeowner's umbrella policy is bundled with your auto policy. If your auto cancels, the umbrella drops. That's a 30-day window, no longer. 4. Your CPA license. Pennsylvania does not require disclosure of family criminal proximity. Your employer's fidelity bond probably does. We'll need to look at your contract. 5. Your mortgage covenant. If your insurance lapses, even briefly, you are technically in breach. The bank doesn't usually catch it. If anyone tells them, they catch it the next morning. 6. Your sister's custody case. Right now, your townhouse is listed as her residence. As long as that listing stands, you are a non-party deponent. Depositions, document subpoenas, the whole apparatus, including, eventually, a question about your son. I sat with my pen rolling between my fingers. "Sloan," I said, "what does winning mean here?" "Honey," she said. Not the honey of my mother, but a different one, the kind a younger woman uses when she is asking an older woman to be her own friend in a room. "Honey, that's not my question to answer. I want you to write it down tonight. Bring it to me Thursday. 3 things. The third one is the one we fight for." I drove home and made a list on the back of a napkin. The list had 4 items. The 4th one I crossed out twice and then wrote back in. Thursday morning, Sloane and I sat across from each other at her conference room table. She had 3 folders. Folder 1, she said. Insurance company unauthorized driver report. We name Brielle as the operator. We attach the police report. This protects you on premium and liability. Folder 2. Police follow-up statement. We clarify in writing. You were not a party to the trip. You did not consent to its purpose. This protects you on negligence. Folder 3. Letter to Brielle's custody attorney. We withdraw your address as a residence reference. We send it certified, with a copy to her court of record. She opened the first folder. She handed me a ballpoint pen. You sign each one in 3 places. Initial the bottom of every page. After this morning, Tori, the family conversation changes. I want you to be ready. I signed. There is a stillness that comes when you sign 3 documents you cannot unsign. It is not relief, exactly. It is the quiet of having stepped over a line you had been telling yourself was further away than it was. The last signature on the 3rd folder took the longest, the custody letter, withdrawing my address. I thought of Mason. I thought of Harper. I thought of the small white sneaker that had been wedged under my passenger seat. I thought of Brielle, 6 years old, with her front teeth missing, sitting on the porch of our childhood house with her elbows on her knees. I had loved that little girl. I had been 5 years older than her, and she had been my person for most of a decade. I signed. Sloane put the folders in a pile. She tied them with a string the way old offices used to tie folders. I expect a phone call from your mother within 4 hours, she said, possibly within 2. What should I do? Don't pick up the first call. Listen to the voicemail once. Don't listen twice. Then go pick up your son from school like it's an ordinary Thursday. I walked back to the parking lot. My phone was face down on the passenger seat where I had left it. I drove a block before it rang. It was my mother. The screen lit up with her name. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 47 seconds long. I listened once. I did not listen twice. I was at Liam's school by 3. My mother showed up at my townhouse at 7:48 p.m. that Thursday. I had given Liam dinner. He was upstairs, reading in bed. I had been about to sit on the couch with a glass of cheap red wine and an episode of an old British baking show, which was the routine I had built for myself, slowly, over the 4 years since the divorce. The doorbell rang. I knew, before I opened the door, who was there. She was crying. She had gotten the certified letter. So had Brielle's attorney. So had the insurance company. The dominoes had begun their tipping at 3:30 that afternoon. How could you do this to your sister? My mother said. She has children, Tori. We raised you better than this. She came in without being invited. She stood in my own front hall in her wool coat and cried with the kind of crying that arrives wearing a costume. My phone rang. My father's name. I let it ring. The voicemail came in. I would learn later that he had said, "If you don't drop the report, I'm taking your name out of the will." My mother's older sister, Aunt Patricia, was already drafting the family group text. I would see it later that night. Tori has decided to sue Brielle and traumatize the children. 14 names on the thread. The aunts, the cousins, even some neighbors who were not technically family. Liam appeared at the top of the stairs in pajamas with rocket ships on them. "Mom, why is Grandma crying?" I will tell you what almost happened in the next 5 seconds. I almost walked back across that line. I almost called Sloane and told her to pull the filings. I almost picked up the phone and called my father and said, "Fine, we'll talk on Sunday." Then my mother, still crying, looked at me over the railing of my own staircase and she said, "You always were the cold one, Tori." I had heard the word dramatic my whole life. I had not, until that moment, understood the word cold. It was the same word. It meant the daughter who will not absorb our consequences. I held the door open. I said, very quietly, Mom, I'm not cold, I'm clear. There's a difference, I'm asking you to leave. She left. Liam came down the stairs. We made hot chocolate at almost 10 on a school night. We played Uno. He won. I was glad. Friday morning, I drove back to Sloane's office. She had been waiting for me. She had 3 documents on her desk. Tori, sit down. We are going to assemble the envelope you bring on Sunday. The first document was a transcript of the dash cam audio. Brielle's recorded phone call. Time-stamped, certified by a transcription service Sloane worked with. 2 pages. The second document was the police report excerpt, the tow itemization, and a 1-page summary from Sloane on her firm letterhead, laying out the legal exposure of the trip. The third document was a bank statement. Sloane had pulled it the day before, after I had given her the account number of the trust my paternal grandmother had set up for me before she died. The trust was supposed to have funded my undergraduate education. After my divorce, when I had been working overtime to keep the house, my father had told me the trust had run out and that I should consider it spent on the right thing. I had not pulled a statement on it in 8 years. I had assumed, the way daughters assume. The statement showed 6 years of withdrawals into an account in Brielle's name. A line every few months, most of them in the 4-figure range, court costs, legal fees, a few labeled simply Brielle. The total sum withdrawn over 6 years was $47,300. The trust had a balance of $112.43. Sloane let me sit with the statement for a while. You don't need to read all 3 at the dinner, she said. You need to read the one the room can't argue with first. Which is that? Whichever one your mother helped write. I nodded. I knew which one that was. We made copies. Sloane gave me a manila envelope. She gave me a sealed second copy, also in a manila envelope, addressed to be held with Edith Caldwell in her own handwriting. Aunt Edith? Your aunt has been calling my office for 2 weeks, Tori. I haven't taken her calls because she is your aunt, not my client. But she will be at the dinner Sunday. You give her the second envelope. I left her office with both envelopes under my arm. They weighed less than a soft-cover book. They would weigh more on Sunday. Friday afternoon at 3:48, the receptionist at my office buzzed me. Tori, your father is in the lobby. I had not seen him in 8 days. I asked her to put him in the small conference room. I closed the QuickBooks file I had been working on. I walked down the hallway slowly. I had not asked him to come. He was sitting in the chair facing the door. He had aged a decade since I had last looked at him. His hands were folded on the table the way men of my father's generation fold their hands when they are about to lie or about to stop lying. Tori, your mother doesn't know I'm here. Okay, Dad. I came to tell you something before Sunday. He breathed out through his nose, the way he breathes when he is buying himself a second. Brielle's first DUI was 8 years ago. There was the hit and run in 2019 that we kept quiet. I paid the man. There was the plea this January. There has been a steady cost the whole time. We have been using your trust to cover it. We were going to put it back. We told ourselves we were going to put it back. I did not move. How much, Dad? $47,000, a little more. I did not move. The conference room had a small ficus tree in the corner. I had never noticed it before. Did Mom and you send Brielle to use my address? He did not answer. He looked at the ficus tree. He pressed his thumb into his other palm. He cried, the way men of his generation cry, quietly, with their eyes closed. That non-answer was the answer. Dad, you and Mom thought you were saving Brielle. You were drowning her. You were drowning me to do it. I am not your second savings account. I have never been your second savings account. Tori, please. Please what, Dad? Please don't file the civil claim, please. I sat with the question for 30 seconds. I sat with it the way I sit with any number on a balance sheet that cannot, for love or for arithmetic, be reconciled. Dad, I'll see you Sunday. He stood up. He nodded. He walked out without looking at the receptionist on the way past her desk. I heard the elevator chime. I went back to my own office. I closed the door. I worked through dinner. That Friday night, after Liam was asleep, I sent my mother a text. 3 minutes later, she replied, "We didn't think you'd come." I did not reply. There was nothing to reply. Saturday morning, I drove Liam to his father's house for the afternoon. I told him I had some adult work to take care of, and I'd be home for bedtime. He looked at me the way he had looked at me on Tuesday, with a small, careful question in his eyes that he chose not to ask out loud. "Mom, you're sure?" "I'm sure, buddy." "Okay." He hugged me with both arms again. I am going to remember the shape of his small body in that hug for the rest of my life. Saturday afternoon, I cleaned the car. The whole car. Inside the trunk, under the floor mats, in the cup holders, in the little side pockets, in the doors. I took the spare car seat out of the back and washed it down with disinfectant. I scrubbed the fabric where the vomit had been. Then I went out to the garage and opened a small kit I had bought from the auto parts store. Body filler, sandpaper, touch-up paint. I worked on the dent in the rear bumper for 2.5 hours. The radio was tuned to an old country station I sometimes listened to when my father was not around. Patsy Cline came on. Crazy. The DJ played it twice in a row. Either he was lazy or he was sentimental, and I could not tell which, and I did not care. I sang along badly with my mouth full of dust. By 4 o'clock, the bumper was as good as I could make it. Not perfect, but mine again. Repaired by the hand of the woman who actually owned it. Sunday morning, I went to a Methodist church in Easton I had never been to before. I sat in the back row. The minister was a woman in her 50s. She preached on the parable of the prodigal son. She said something I had never heard before about that parable, that the elder brother had a story too, and that the father's love for the elder brother was a different shape, but not a smaller shape. I cried briefly in my own pew. Nobody saw it. I did not know any of those people. I drove home. Sunday afternoon at 4:43, I started the car. The envelope was on the passenger seat. The car was finally mine again. Let me back up a single evening before I take you into my mother's dining room. Saturday night, after the body filler had cured and I had picked Liam up from his father's, I sat with him at bedtime. He had a copy of Frog and Toad Are Friends. It is a quiet book. It is, as far as I am concerned, the best book about love ever written for children. He had me read the chapter about the cookies. The one where Toad keeps eating cookies, and Frog tries to help him stop. And finally, Frog throws all the cookies out the window for the birds. When I closed the book, Liam looked at me very seriously. "Mom, do you love Aunt Brielle?" He had been holding the question, I think, for 3 days. I did not answer immediately. I sat with the question. I owed him the same care he was offering me. "I love who she could have been," I said. "And I love the little girl I knew when she was your age. I think we have to love some people from a distance sometimes. Not because they are bad, because being close is making both of us worse." He thought about that. The bedside lamp made a soft circle on the ceiling. "Like Toad and the cookies?" I laughed. It was the first real laugh in 2 weeks, the kind of laugh that surprises you in your own throat. "Yes, buddy. Exactly like Toad and the cookies." He nodded. "You're a wise man, Liam." "I'm 7. "That counts." He leaned against my arm. I sat with him until his breathing slowed and went deep. I sat for 14 more minutes after that, just to be sure he was all the way down. The Aveeno baby lotion on his hair smelled like it had since he was a baby. The clock in the hallway ticked. I had been told my whole life that loving someone meant absorbing their consequences. I sat on the edge of my son's small bed, in the lamp's soft circle, and I thought no. I thought, very quietly, no, that is not what loving someone is. I tucked him in. I went downstairs. I read through the envelope one last time. I slept 4 hours. It was enough. The Sunday clock began to move. Sunday at 5 o'clock. My mother's house in Quakertown. There were 27 people in the living room and dining room. I had counted, the way I always counted. Aunts, uncles, cousins. 3 of the cousins had brought children. Mason and Harper were at the kids' table in the corner with paper plates and orange juice in plastic cups. Brielle was sitting on the arm of a couch wearing a paper sash that read, "Birthday Girl in Glitter." She did not look at me when I came in. Aunt Edith was in the kitchen helping my mother with the pot roast. Aunt Edith looked at me when I came in. She nodded, very slightly. I gave her the second envelope without a word, and she put it inside her own purse without a word, and we went on into the dining room together. There were 6 chairs at the table. The folding chair from the back porch was sitting at the foot. The same chair as the Sunday before. The same chair as 1,000 Sundays before that. I took the folding chair. I put my purse on the floor by my feet. The first envelope was inside my purse. We ate the pot roast. We ate the green bean casserole with the dry onions. Cousin Ryan, who is 28, and had recently moved back to the area, sat across from me. He kept catching my eye. He did not say anything. His silence had the weight of a witness. Toward the end of dessert, yellow cake from a box, with chocolate frosting from a tub. My mother stood up. She tapped her glass with her butter knife. "Tori," she said, and gave me the smile she always gave me when she was hoping I would do the next thing right. "Would you like to say a few words for your sister's birthday?" I set my napkin down beside my plate. I stood up. I took the envelope out of my purse. "Honey," my mother said in a slightly different voice, "just keep it warm. We know you don't do speeches." "I keep my speeches short, Mom," I said. "This one will be 90 seconds. I have it timed." I held the envelope. I felt 27 pairs of eyes adjust to me. The dining room got the kind of quiet that happens when 27 forks pause at exactly the same moment in 27 different mouths. I opened the envelope. The first document was the dash cam transcript. I read 3 sentences from it. "This is a transcript of audio recorded inside my own car last Saturday afternoon. It was recorded by my dash cam. I had it installed last year for safety reasons. The driver, my sister, is on the phone with somebody. I will read 3 of the sentences she said." I read them, slowly, the same flat voice I use to read tax tables to clients. A murmur traveled around the table. Aunt Patricia's hand went to her mouth. Brielle stood up. "Tori, that is so out of context." "Brielle, I have 90 seconds. You'll have plenty of time after." I went to the second document. I did not read all of it. I read the heading, the date, and the line about 2 minor passengers, neither restrained. I read the line about the suspended license. I read the $1,800. A sound moved through the room. Not yet a word. The sound was the sound of 27 adults having the same thought at the same time. I went to the third document. This last one is a 6-year statement. It's from the trust my grandmother set up before she died. The trust was meant for my undergraduate education. The trust was supposed to have funded my schooling. After my divorce, my father told me it had been spent on the right thing. I assumed he meant my schooling. I held up the page. It was not spent on my schooling. It was spent across 6 years on my sister's legal fees. The total withdrawn was $47,300. The current balance is $112.43. My father closed his eyes. My mother's hand found his arm. Brielle stood up, sat back down, stood up. Aunt Edith, in the kitchen doorway, said, very quietly, "I told you, Diane. I told you years ago." From the kids' table, in his small, clear voice, Mason asked, "Mommy, what's a license suspension?" Nobody at the dining table laughed. I did not stop. I had not yet given the room what they had not been able to give themselves. I returned the documents to the envelope. I closed it. I looked across the table at Aunt Edith, in the doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder, and I held her gaze for 2 seconds. I turned back to the room. Mom, Dad, Brielle, I am not here to debate whether any of this happened. I have the documents. I have copies with my attorney. Aunt Edith now has copies as well. I am here so that everyone in this room can stop pretending. Stop pretending you don't know. My mother said my name. I waited. She did not say anything else. I am filing a civil claim Monday morning for restoration of the trust fund. The amount is $47,300. If the family wishes to settle out of court, my attorney's contact is enclosed. Inside the envelope, I will not be discussing this further at family events. There will not be many family events. I picked up my purse from the floor. Mom, thank you for the meal. The roast was good. Brielle stood all the way up this time. Tori, you are destroying us. I looked at her. I had been her older sister for 33 years. I had loved her since the day she came home from the hospital in a yellow blanket. I felt for 1 second the full weight of that love, and I felt, in the next second, that it did not change what was true. Brielle, I said gently, I am declining to be destroyed with you. There is a difference. My father reached for my arm as I passed his chair. I stepped back so that his hand met air. Dad, please don't touch me right now. I walked out through the kitchen. Aunt Edith followed me. She did not say anything until we were on the gravel driveway by the rental sedan. The October air smelled like burning leaves from someone's yard 2 streets over. The porch light hummed. Sweetheart, she said. I'm sorry it took us 38 years. I hugged her. We stood like that for a while. She is a small woman. She smelled like rose hand cream and cooked onions. I'll call you Tuesday, Aunt Edith. You'd better, sweetheart. I drove home with the windows up. The folding chair was still empty in my mother's dining room. I did not take it back inside. I had never taken it back inside. I was not going back inside. Tuesday morning, Aunt Edith called me at 9:14 a.m. Sweetheart, I have been making my own list. The cousins, the ones who have called me over the years, the ones I told, give your aunt a little grace. She's having a hard time. 3 of them have texted me since Sunday. She named them. Cousin Ryan, Cousin Megan, who lived in Allentown and worked at a school, Cousin Lainey, who had moved to Vermont and barely came down anymore. All 3 of them, she said, had reached out. All 3 of them, she said, had been the difficult ones in the family at one point or another. None of them, until this Sunday, had quite known they were not alone. I'd like you to come to dinner this Sunday at my house, Tori. The 4 of you, plus me. I will cook the pot roast. I have always made it better than your mother. She knows this, and won't admit it. I laughed. The first laugh on a Tuesday. Aunt Edith, I will come. Bring Liam, I have a yard. He will love your yard. That afternoon, Cousin Ryan texted me a single word. Finally. I let my mother's calls go to voicemail. There were 2 more after Sundays. Each was around 20 seconds. I did not delete them. I did not listen to them either. Sloan called Wednesday at 3. Brielle's custody attorney had withdrawn from her case. The court had stayed her petition pending review of the criminal referrals. Sloan had received an email from a different attorney representing my parents about the trust fund claim. The email used the word amicable. Tori, they want to settle. For how much? They've offered $42,800. They said they cannot reach the full amount. They would need a second mortgage. They've already started the paperwork. I think it's true. I had a colleague check. They have started the paperwork. I sat with that for a while. Take it, Sloan. Don't push them past what they actually have. You're sure? I'm sure. She paused. Tori, you don't have to give them grace. I'm not giving them grace, Sloan. I'm closing the ledger. That's a different thing. She laughed. Yeah, okay. I'll write it up. We can sign Friday. I hung up. I went and made Liam a snack. He had asked before school if there were any more cherry tomatoes. There were. I cut them in half the way he liked them. 6 weeks later, I sat at my kitchen table with Liam doing math homework across from me. The trust money had landed in a fresh account 3 weeks before. I had transferred it the same afternoon into Liam's college savings, where my grandmother had probably hoped, all along, that it would eventually go. The settlement was signed. The no-contact order between Brielle and me was in effect. My address had been formally withdrawn from her custody case. Her case had been refiled in her own county, with her own apartment as her own residence, the way it should have been from the start. The dash cam was sitting in a small drawer in my garage. I had cleaned the lens. I had not put it back in the car. I might not. The car was mine again either way. Liam looked up from his subtraction. Mom. Yeah, buddy. Does Grandma still love me? I sat with that question. He had been holding it, I think, for 6 weeks. Yes, I said. She does. From a distance. Sometimes that is the safest love. He thought about that. Like Toad and the cookies? I laughed. The kitchen got very gold in that minute. The light at 6 o'clock in late October has a particular quality to it. Honey-colored. Slow. Yeah, buddy, like Toad and the cookies. He went back to his math. I made him a grilled cheese. The kitchen smelled like butter and the crusty edge of bread. The radio was on low. An oldies station, not country. Somebody's piano ballad I half knew. Aunt Edith had called me on Tuesday again. We had standing dinner at her house every other Sunday now. Cousin Ryan had come to the first one, and Cousin Megan to the second, and we had played Scrabble and drunk old-fashioned hot apple cider that smelled like cloves. Liam had run in the backyard with the neighbor's beagle until his cheeks were red. I cut his sandwich diagonally. I placed it in front of him. He looked up. He smiled the smile he had been smiling since he was a baby, the one that lifted only one corner of his mouth. Thanks, Mom. You're welcome, buddy. I sat across from him. I watched him eat. I had not been told, growing up, that Grace would taste like a grilled cheese sandwich at 6 in the evening in October. I knew it now. Some things you learn late. The next Tuesday, I went back to my office. The cubicle was the same cubicle. The fluorescent light above my desk still had the same flicker in the left tube. Maeve dropped a coffee on my desk on her way past. A small ceramic mug, not paper. You're welcome, she said. Thank you, Maeve. How's the boy? He's good. He's wise. He's 7. She laughed. 7 is a good age. Hold him there if you can. She went on to her own desk. I drank the coffee. It was hot. It was good. There is a frame on my desk now. 3 photos. Liam at 5. Liam at 7. And an old photo I had asked Aunt Edith for. A shot of me and her at the Lehigh County Fair when I was 6. Both of us with cotton candy on our faces. I had not even remembered the photo existed. She had pulled it from a box in her basement and brought it to dinner. In my wallet, behind Liam's school photo, is Sloane Aldrich's business card. I have not needed to call her again. I keep the card because some women need to be pointed somewhere, and I want to be ready when one of them asks me where to go. That morning, on the way to school, I drove Liam past the exit for Quakertown without slowing down. The sun was at the angle that, in October, turns the windshield gold for exactly 4 minutes. He was humming in the back seat, some song he'd learned at school. I did not recognize the tune. It did not matter. At the very beginning of this story, I told you that the morning my mother said, "Don't make this dramatic," was the morning I learned how a quiet woman becomes a loud one. That part is true, but the second half I had not learned yet. The second half is this. A quiet woman, after she has been loud, becomes quiet again. The room she lives in is different. The chair she sits in is her own. The driveway is her own. The car is her own. The son in the back seat is her own. I used to think family was the place you could always come back to. I know now it is also the place you can finally walk away from and still be whole. If this story sat with you tonight, if you saw a sister, a daughter, an aunt, or yourself in it, leave one word in the comments, the word your family calls you when they're trying to make you smaller. I read every one. There are more stories like mine on this channel. The next one I'll be telling involves a will, a stepmother, and an envelope that traveled 47 years to find the right hands. I'll see you there.